I have the pleasure of sitting down for a fireside chat for our first session after the break with two distinguished gentlemen from AT&T. The first is Yigal Elbaz. He's the Senior Vice President of Technology and Network Services and the CTO at AT&T. And then we have Mike Toriano. He's the Senior Vice President of Business Products. He's also on the MEF board. So we have the guy that designs the network, and we have the guy that owns everything that runs over the network. So it's perfect here. All right, gentlemen, come on out. I'm going to sit right here. Mike, you go.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome back.
Where's the fire?
Where's the fire? Well, there's red numbers right there.
Okay.
We'll pretend that's the fire. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Normally, I wing these things, but the set of questions that we have here are so good that I'm going to try to keep as close to them as possible. So first, I just want to say thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. My company, Vertical Systems Group, we're the ones that do the leaderboards. You know, we track the wireline data services and the technologies and rank the top providers. AT&T here, along with many of the other providers in this room, rank at the top consistently for global US SD-WANs, carrier Ethernet, wavelengths, fiber-lit buildings. So we have some great folks on the stage here to talk about these next couple of topics. So, Yigal, I'm going to start with you. Okay?
Sure.
Given the pace of technology adoption and change, tell us about the state of AT&T's network transformation and what is currently top of mind for you as you design the future of the network.
Sure, Erin. So at AT&T, our mission is to be the best broadband company in North America. Our core connectivity business is based on a true converged network. It's made of two-scale platform, a 5G wireless network and a multi-gig fiber network. They're typically talked separately, but not for us. We believe customers want broadband, doesn't matter if it's fixed on wireless. Our integrated fiber plan helps us to build fiber routes that supports three distinct use cases: mobile backhauling, consumer broadband, and enterprise services. We're converging all of those services on a multi-service converged edge. We used to converge this back deep in the network. We're now moving everything to the edge. Our fiber network is already covering 24 million living units. If you look into our wireless network, AT&T has the largest wireless network in the US. Our 5G network covers already 290 million POPs. We heads down building our new acquired mid-band spectrum, and that covers already 175 million POPs in the US. As devices become more available, we're migrating more of our customers into the 5G standalone core. All of our 5G customers today are served out of a highly distributed, cloud-based, non-standalone core. We were one of the few operators globally that have chose to do that already on the non-standalone core. You can't really talk about 5G without mentioning low latency and low latency services. And it's not coming only by improving the air interface. It's really coming from converging compute, storage, and networking at the edge of the network and bringing it close to customers. We took a kind of a different approach of how we thought about this, and rather than bringing the cloud players into our data centers, we took advantage of the fact that actually cloud providers are expanding their regional footprint in the US. So we brought our network into those regions, and with that, we've done it in 12 large metros in the US, and with that, we're building a platform for application to be built for low latency. And if you bring all of those things that I just mentioned together, we now have a remarkable platform for innovation that really helps us to tap into the new cycle of mobile economy innovation, which frankly, cycles that we didn't participate in the past. Value was created, applications were built on top of the network, and we as an industry, we didn't participate in the way we should have. And we think that with adding a software layer on top of the network and exposing a lot of those capabilities through APIs, we think that this time around, we are much more confident that the outcome will be different.
All right. Well, thank you very much. So, over to you, Mike. What are the key trends our business is focused on to stay competitive and utilize the flexibility of today's network? I guess specifically AT&T's network.
Well, listen, I'm going to answer it generally for just a minute. I'm sure anyone who talks to customers, the first topic is around security. And
We just heard it.
the threat landscape has changed dramatically over the last couple of years. You think about hybrid work. You think about, to Agal's point a minute ago, as we think about converged networks, wireline and wireless, you've got to think about security very different. So that's number one. The other thing on security, just quickly, you know, it's always in the news when there's a cyber issue, and typically you talk about schools, government institutions, bigger enterprise, hotels in Vegas. What you may not realize is about 45% of the cyber incidents last year were actually targeting small and medium-sized companies.
Right.
And why? Well, they don't have big IT staffs. They haven't invested in cyber the same way other companies have. So there's a soft underbelly, but security is clearly number one. The second big trend that I don't see changing anytime soon is really around the move to the cloud, multi-cloud. Most enterprise customers have 3 to 5 different cloud providers, and they're moving workloads again across wireless and wireline. And so as we build and engineer networks, we've got to make sure that we've got the most efficient on-ramp into that environment and a consistent experience regardless of the network access type. That takes me actually to wireless. Third trend that I'd lean into, we see wireless taking on a much more strategic role, quite frankly, than in years past. We see more customers, and you've seen this with IoT, you see it with the conversations on private 5G. My guess is, actually just audience participation, quick show of hands, how many of you still have a wireline desk phone?
There's one over there.
I see one.
And that person works for Cisco. No, seriously. So your mobile phone is now your business communication device. I think that's fair. But what we gave up over time was the integration with the back end infrastructure. You think about call transfer, call compliance, call recording, right? So that takes on a different lens. But ultimately what I would argue is as we have more advanced wireless networks, there's a different strategic conversation in the wireless space. Now, for many of our customers, again, they're cutting across fiber-based assets and wireless. So how do we think about engineering that? That leads me to the fourth trend or point, and that's really around more focus on business continuity and reliability. And again, I'm going to make the argument, most of our customers don't necessarily care about the access type. In fact, we were recently with a large drugstore chain, and their CIO said to us, listen, a big portion of our retail stores will be fiber fed, where you have fiber, but a big chunk of them will be wireless, fixed wireless fed, and we're okay with that. It meets the use case. And so I think it's important as we think about standardization, network as a service, right, security, you've got to do it across multiple access types moving forward.
Yeah, you sure do. Thank you. Yeah, for many operators, monetization is a key focus. So what's AT&T's approach to monetizing your network?
Sure. So let me maybe start with an industry view. I think, you know, I talked about the missed opportunity in the past, and I think we are much better positioned as an industry looking forward. I think our understanding of software is different. I think our understanding of cloud is completely different, right? We, as any other enterprise customer, we are moving the IT workloads into the cloud. We are building network function on cloud infrastructure. Our understanding of APIs, opening up the networks. These are things that are trends that you're seeing across the industry and are critical for actually building a NAS or thinking about monetization. For us, there's two big trends or investment that I want to make sure that we capture here. So for years, we've been very vocal about our network journey and network transformation journey. And it was all about virtualization and software-defined networking. We have today an open, we're running a lot of our workloads in open, disaggregated, and programmable hardware. Our core backbone that carries close to 625 petabyte of data every single day. 60% of that traffic is already running on an open, disaggregated platforms. We're extending the exact same hardware into the edge to support that multi-service converge, as I mentioned before. Our optical layer is getting open through our open ROADM initiatives. our 5G core is moving into the cloud. We've been virtualizing network functions for many years. We built our own network cloud for several years until we sold those assets to Microsoft, and now we're licensing back the cars for Microsoft. So we have, and we continue to build an open, disaggregated, and programmable network. On the other side, we have years of investment in APIs. APIs are not new to us. We have a couple of thousands of APIs. We have billions of API calls every month from internal and external system. There was a big, for an example, there was a big device that was launched a couple of weeks ago. Any channel activation, every eSIM provisioning, every entitlement check, they are all based on APIs. Every MVNO that we onboard are all based on APIs. However, I think many of them is around systems and what I call network periphery. And I think what we want to do next is actually take the three things that I talked about: a robust converged network, a true open, disaggregated, and programmable network, and a layer of APIs. And if you bring all of this together, we think that we are uniquely positioned to unlock value and create new ways of monetizations that we didn't have before, besides just traditional subscription models.
Great answer, thanks. There was, for any of you that were at the LSO Summit yesterday, there was an interesting use case for AT&T International buy-sell through open APIs. And so I'd like to ask Mike a little bit more. How are open APIs going to help the business going forward?
Well, I'm going to build on monetization for just a minute.
First, please.
Listen, obviously as an industry, carriers talking to carriers in a more efficient way that unleashes or accelerates commerce. But when you get to this monetization conversation, I also believe it's going to unlock other customers' business models that necessarily haven't fully come to light. And what I mean by that is there's an opportunity for us as we disaggregate the network for companies to consume us as an ingredient, if you will, into their products and services and take those to market. And that's an important element that we shouldn't lose sight of. Listen, first of all, I want to back up. We are at a MEF event, and what drew me to get excited about MEF in general, years ago, this was carriers talking to carriers around Ethernet, predominantly. And if you look around the room today, even look at the board makeup. We have a hyperscaler on the board. We have some of the best leading technology companies participating. You saw the press release earlier today about 16 companies working together around standards. This is an ecosystem that has really matured over the last number of years. The hyperscaler world, the carrier world, the wholesaler world, the technology provider world. And so if we're going to accelerate our industry, open APIs, standards-based implementation can only help accelerate the business. We talk a lot about some of the common use cases, network on-demand type services. That could be as quick as provisioning across wireline and wireless. It could mean quality of service, on-demand type functionality. It could obviously play into the cybersecurity story that I opened up with. But you mentioned LSO. I think about the reality, many of our customers, their actual, their branch offices, their headquarters, their other places where they do business aren't necessarily always on our network, right? We have a partner of networks that we work together, and certainly if you're deploying a global solution, by the very nature of that, we don't have assets around the world. And so we work with other partners, and the only way that you can do that at scale in an efficient, cost-efficient manner is through standards-based open APIs. So that's why we continue at AT&T to lean into this conversation, because we think it's the right thing to do for our customers, but more importantly, we think it's important for the broad ecosystem, not just the telcos, but the hyperscalers and other technology providers.
That's right. Yigal, you want to add a little more on that as far as
Sure.
AT&T's sort of the network perspective?
Yes,
Your unique perspective?
I want to go back to the standardization points,
please.
because clearly everyone wants to be unique and different in how we offer services. However, there's a lot of importance and interoperability between us for the reasons that Mike said. And there's, for an example, on the wireless side, developers not necessarily want to build an app for one network. They want to have ubiquitous where they can put their app and serve many customers on various networks. So there's a lot of value for us participating in those industry communities and alliances, whether it's MEF or the GSMA Open Gateway or the Linux Foundation Camara or others, because this is where we work on this interoperability, making sure that, as I said, we unlock the value and we allow the enterprise customers and the developer to take advantage across networks.
I think there's an interesting thing that popped up in one of the earlier sessions today, that there's smaller service providers, there's a lot of manual processes. Larger service providers, there's a lot of proprietary processes. Seems like AT&T is doing a good job of trying to bridge that gap. Do you want to talk a little bit about maybe?
Sure. First of all, yes, and this is why, again, part of us participating in those alliances as well as building that open disaggregated network. But I think when we're coming into that domain of APIs and NAS, I think it needs to start with talk with customers.
Right.
Talk with the developer and ask them, how do you want to consume network services? How do you want to, what kind of APIs do you want? In many cases, we as an industry have a tendency to think ourselves and then, hey, this is what exists. No, we need to go out. We need to meet them where they want, whether it's through our channels, maybe it's through cloud marketplaces, and maybe it's aggregators. So there's different way to meet developer and enterprise customers when it comes to those services. And there's a couple of things that we actually need to solve, and I think that also came in the previous panel, which is networks are complex. So how do we simplify the experience in a world that many of you, when you need a compute and storage, what separates between you and that is a credit card. So we need to get to that world and making sure that we provide a seamless experience. And I'll provide a couple of quick examples. Imagine a wireless endpoint on which you want to connect it privately on a private network into an application in the public cloud. Well, if you're from our industry, you know that it's doable, but that can take time. What if we can expose 3 lines of codes that allow you to do that? And oh, by the way, maybe you can actually do that from the cloud marketplace where you're already doing your transaction. Mike talked about multi-cloud. Mm-hmm. Think about enterprise networking today. We used to come to have a conversation with an enterprise. It was about connecting branches. Today, an enterprise is a collection of branches, hybrid employees, workloads that sits in your own data centers, in carrier hotels, in public cloud. You may use 3 different SaaS platforms. How do you build a simple network to connect all of this? So that's what we're trying to accomplish, and this is what we're trying to enable, but by some of the things that we discussed.
That's great, thank you. So you mentioned earlier about the SASE certification, that Nav and Pascal dug pretty deep into that this morning with some of the announcement. What do you see as the true value and importance of certification for enterprise customers?
Well, first of all, let's just start off with, I think it was 16 companies, all announcing this morning. And again, if you look at the makeup of the 16, you've got telecommunication providers, service providers, SASE security companies, SD-WAN providers. It's a nice mix. Listen, I actually think there are 2 lenses. We'll start with the customer, the enterprise, and I'll talk about the carrier.
Yeah.
Listen, if you're in the enterprise space, now you have an independent body certifying something. You're taking the confusion out perhaps about what am I really buying? It's a black box, it's a mystery, and I don't really know if it does what it's supposed to do. We're going to take that out of the equation. By the way, a lot of our customers have mixed environments. That could have come through technology decisions that they made, could have come through mergers and acquisition, where one company had vendor X and another company has vendor Y. And so now they can step back and have an independent view of the equipment, the technologies, the apparatus. So that helps, gives confidence to the enterprise customer that what they bought is actually going to do what they said it was going to do. From an industry perspective, at least for where we sit, I mentioned earlier, many of our customers are deploying global solutions.
Right.
And we have to cut across a number of network technologies. And so it gives us confidence that all the other brethren in the industry, who some days we're competitors, but other days we have to work together to stitch networks together on behalf of the enterprise. it gives us confidence that there's interoperability and standards across the ecosystem. And so I think it's those two lenses from a carrier industry perspective, but most importantly from a customer, enterprise customer perspective around confidence.
So it seems like you're, as we have many times in the past, walking that balance between having the consistency across multiple carriers, but still having the ability to offer something unique and interesting to your customer base.
No doubt. I think, the other important thing, if you're an enterprise customer, in many cases you buy a solution and you're going to hope and pray and that's probably not the right phrase, hope and pray, but you're going to certainly make sure that it maintains its relevance as security protocols evolve, et cetera, et cetera. That's another important opportunity for what we just announced today to not only look at the current software loads, but the future and make sure that the customers understand the evolving relevance of that solution that they just bought.
Right.
Carriers will put other services on top of that, whether it's managed services, right, professional services, et cetera. So there's plenty of innovation that can happen even above and beyond the certification conversation.
Want to add anything to that before we move on?
No.
You're good. He's good. We have about, 9 minutes left or so. I do want to, we're coming to the end of some of our prepared questions, which is always fun. The focus of this global networking event is network as a service. So how does all of the previous questions we just talked about, how does that tie into AT&T's overall view of network as a service? Yes, from the network perspective and then from the overall product perspective. Who wants to go first?
I'll start. So first of all, this is a really unique point in time, very exciting. Again, we have years of investment that actually now we can bring them to bear, and we can start socializing new concept of network as the killer app, or what we call network embedded X, which is, you name it. You can be network embedded security, network embedded transportation, network embedded healthcare. We're building networks that are allowing cloud-based and on-demand networking. Can we pre-provision capacity between network and the cloud? We're thinking about how we can create near real-time, exposable, and programmable network. Like, these are things and themes that have been discussed in the industry for many years, and I think we're finally getting to the point where we have all of the assets. And by the way, some of this is even in the standards, for sure on the wireless side. So we're finally at that moment where we can bring to bear all of those investment and development and progress that we made across the industries. And again, tapping into the going back, we can talk about network as a service all day long. If you don't have a converged network, and if you don't have an open and programmable network, then it's not enough. Just to write an API, that's the easy part. Sure. Making sure that you can have a service running from a cloud marketplace all the way into a port in the network, that's the complexity. And I think our job is to make sure that Mike and team has the ability to go to their customers and simplify and remove all of that simplicity from the experience.
Just to build on that from a product standpoint, I mentioned, obviously we take products directly to market. There's a whole other side of the equation where we provide wholesale transport to other providers, and we will be an ingredient into other companies' products and services moving forward. Each one of those swim lanes have their own monetization strategies and product sets, right? But one thing I didn't touch on, and it just triggered me as you asked that question, probably like many of you, we've been going through a transformation of our product portfolio, actually, over the last couple of years. What I mean by that is there are a tremendous amount of products that we are actually retiring because we don't think it fits the future mode of operation of where we want to be as a company. When you do that, you make some hard choices on the technology providers you're going to work with and the depth that you'll go. I'll give you an example. In the software-defined networking space, at one point we had over 8 vendors that we worked with. Yeah. We will not have 8 vendors in the future. When you pick a handful, you can go really deep on roadmaps. And you're going to get invited into a multi-year journey with some of those companies. You can't do that with 8, but you can probably do it with a handful. The reason I take you down that path is he builds out network technologies, and we can share that with a deeper conversation about with those customers, those companies that are building products. That sets off a whole different conversation around innovation, products that we can distribute. By the way, in many cases, it unlocks a different set of distribution, indirect distribution, that perhaps hasn't truly been tapped. And that conversation definitely shifts by industry. Mm-hmm. What I mean by that is the healthcare industry has a very different look and feel in terms of the technologies and the channel partners as they move massive medical images around versus what the fintech industry, right, or manufacturing. And so having that lens across it and being able to, at a standards base, at a broad scale base, unlock and disaggregate the network so that those companies can consume it is critically important to us. The follow-on question you're probably likely to ask, because I think it came up in an earlier session, is, well, when does this become real? And how does it scale? How do you think about that? Somebody made a comment yesterday in a different session. You know, network as a service isn't necessarily a new concept. It's been around for a long time. The question I think that we're debating as an industry, certainly we look at it, is what's the minimum viable, for lack of a better phrase, elements that you need to expose so that you can start to unleash innovation, not trying to boil the ocean, and you can do that in a manner where multiple technology providers and carrier service providers can work together so that you truly have a footprint that developers get excited about. Because it's been so disjointed historically. As an industry, we've got to solve for that.
Right.
And maybe to add to this, which I think is really important, is as much as we all participate and want to have standardized APIs and interoperability, we just need to remember that we live in the software world. No one is waiting for us.
Right.
And as an industry, we can't spend 18 months to discuss a protocol or how the API is going to be structured, because I'll give you an example. If I would sit here a year ago and I would ask you, how many of you know OpenAI or GenAI? I'm sure maybe 2 people would raise their hand.
Right.
Now, everyone can explain the difference between ChatGPT 3.5 and ChatGPT 4 and how many parameters in each one of them. That is the speed of innovation, and that is the speed of technology. And I'm saying this is because we need to be ready. Use cases will emerge. Developers would want to build immersive applications. Enterprise would want to move, and we need to be ready. And as an industry, we need to make sure that as much as we connect and interop, we need to move fast.
I'm going to just sharpen that for just one moment since we're coming to the end of our time here. If you had one challenge for those in this room, which, as you said earlier, there's hyperscalers here, there's equipment vendors, there's cloud providers, there's service, there's international US, what would it be to achieve that next level? What do you think is the roadblock that this room, the folks in this room, and MEF can help with directly?
That's a good question. Actually, I'm going to start with what was announced this morning. I hate to keep going back to it, but I do think it's important to see this many companies come together on one topic.
Okay.
A cross-section of hyperscalers, classic SD-WAN and SASE companies and SPs. We need more around that. I think it's important that we don't get lost in, again, trying to boil the ocean. It goes back to his point around speed. This conversation about SASE certification, it took obviously some time for the teams to come up with that. But now you think about what does that unleash, because here are a number of companies that said, I'm going to lean into that. We need a few more examples like that. And I know MEF's already thinking through where the next phase will take us, but I think that only helps accelerate the business, the industry.
Great. Anything to add before we?
I'll connect to the developers here in the audience.
Okay.
And I will say the following. For years, for sure on wireless networks, sometimes there's some level of unpredictability. What's going to be congestion? What's going to be the latency? And for many years, you have built a lot of the intelligence into the app. We build protocol and codec and all kind of things to solve that notion of potential unpredictability. I think we're getting to the point where you can build your app to the network. And It's on us to demonstrate the level of exposure and the granularity of the data and the intelligence that we can expose out of the network, so you can focus on building the experience and how to serve your customers. So I think if we get to the point where people are building application and services to the network, I think that's going to be a huge progress.
That's great. Well, thank you very much. Unless you have anything more focused to add on that.
We're good.
No, he's good. Thank you very much. Thank you both, to Yigal and Tom.
Thank you.